Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Renegade Consortium podcast. Today is a continuation of last week's podcast that we had because we decided this was such a big topic, we have to break it into two. So we were talking about where do leads come from, and at this point in the year, we should have our goals not only written out, but starting to execute on those things. So what we're talking about is where do those leads come from and what's going to be the most effective way to make sure that we continue to get business throughout the course of the year. So in last week's podcast, if you haven't seen it, it's a good one. We talked about the free or low cost leads. So in real estate, are we able to manage getting leads if we don't have a huge marketing budget? Today, we're going to be talking about paid leads. So we're going to be talking about ways that we can use that marketing budget that we've set aside specifically for our business. So where do we put that money? How are we going to be able to utilize using those leads that we come in, and what is effective? There are a lot of different places that we can get leads from that we can throw money at, but is that a good idea? So we're going to be talking about that today, and we have our panel here. We have Andrew Becker, and we have Stephen Meadows. We are short Michael Ehrlich. He's not feeling well. I'm sorry. He'll be here in the next Renegade Consortium podcast, but that is what we're working with today. So let's start with the one that we all have heard of, Zillow. And this is the ivory tower up in Seattle where they are able to help us with a lot of leads. There's so many agents that use this as a platform. So, Stephen, talk to us a little bit about getting Zillow leads and how efficient is this platform for getting high-quality leads?
Well, Zillow's kind of gone through quite an evolution lately, but when I first dealt with Zillow on our lead gen team, it was straight up you paid for your share of voice, and it was basically a percentage of the times you're going to be in front of people or something in a round robin. I don't know. It was very confusing. The pricing did not make a lot of sense, and they were very expensive leads per lead. And it varies by market. So what we noticed was, for instance, in Winchester, Virginia, which is not a huge town. I mean, the city itself is only about 25,000 people. The leads were about $250 a pop, which is pretty hefty. And this is not per deal. Let me verify. We'll talk about conversions in a little bit, but this is per lead. This is to get a name and email address of a person that maybe one day want to buy a house. I'm paying $250. You get out into the rural areas, and it was maybe like 100 or 150. We were seeing that the rural areas were actually converting at a lot higher rate for some reason than they were in the larger areas. I still don't, to this day, understand the metrics behind that, but it seems to still hold true. In our company, generally speaking, Zillow leads are working better in smaller markets. I'm talking like 8 to 10,000, cities, person cities, the counties, we're not talking like DC or San Francisco. We're talking like, Hickorbilly Central, West Virginia or whatever. I mean, we're not talking these huge towns. So now Zillow has kind of moved into, I believe, more of a referral model. And, they had their Premier, and now they had their, I can't remember all the names of their Flex. Thank you.
The new one. Yeah.
And I had a friend that was on a team, and they did Zillow, and they were one of Zillow's absolute top performers for teams across the country or in that region or whatever. And they were told by their Zillow rep at the time, this is a couple years ago, the absolute best converter for Zillow is about 6%. So agents, if you're out there and you're trying to do the math on, $250 per lead, a 6% conversion means 100 leads is about 6 transactions. Okay. So that's not great, but that's way better than the national average. National average is like 1% conversion. So that gets pretty pricey. If you had to buy 100 Zillow leads to get a 1% conversion rate, you're paying a ridiculous amount of money.
That's $25,000 for one lead.
Right. Yeah. For one closing, if you're at a 1% conversion rate, the money does not work. And that's what we were finding is we were spending a lot of money because we were buying them in bulk. So we were spending multiple thousands of dollars a month, and we just weren't seeing the conversion. And the other problem is you mentioned high quality. Maybe I've heard lots of people, I closed $1.5 million house with Zillow. It happens. It absolutely happens. We were getting $50,000 build lots. So we're paying $250 per lead to get a $50,000 lot. And at that time, nobody was really buying to build. So, the numbers just were not lining up. And you don't get to choose. If you pick a zip code, it's the whole thing. And that zip code that we had just happens to be also encompassing a section of the county that is mostly land. So we struggled with Zillow. A lot of agents do well with it, but I think the problem is that people don't know the math. So when they're evaluating the opportunity, they're not taking into account how much they have to buy to get one deal. We had an agent who swore by Zillow. I make all kinds of money on Zillow. I do so well with that. So it's great. Tell us about your numbers. She had closed 6 deals with Zillow in a year. That's not terrible. We did the math. How much is your average sales price? Yada, yada, yada. She took home $700 per transaction after she paid Zillow her monthly fee and everything. And she was like, oh.
Yeah.
You did make money, but you only made $700 a deal after and I think there is I know I'm going on a tangent here, but I think there's this like decoupling that needs to happen. Agents, they tend to look at these things in like a overall thing. Like I'm going to spend $1,000 and get these leads and get a transaction and I'll make money. Well, are you sure that the $1,000 is going to get you enough business? Like you have to look at it from the expense category and the income category. And a lot of people don't connect those two. So they don't realize they've spent $10,000 to make $7,000. And I made $7,000. Woohoo! But you paid $10,000.
How much did it cost you? Yeah. This is sort of like the conversation we have about getting loans. It's like, yeah, but how expensive is that money going to be?
Exactly. And so whereas you hear the stories about Zillow. Oh, yeah, I get Zillow leads. What are you actually converting, though? Getting the leads is like that instant gratification. It's like, yeah, I got leads. But if you're not converting, if you're not able to close them, those are useless. You're just shelling out money. That's why teams tend to be where people go for large lead gen groups, because an agent can't afford multi-thousands of dollars a month for programs like Zillow.
Right.
And on the referral, everyone's like, well, I'll just do the referral thing. With Zillow, it's really hard to get approved for that now because they're very picky. You have to have a proven track record of conversion because Zillow's basically saying, I don't make money if you don't make money, so you better be good at what you're doing or you're out of the program. Johnny Smith off the street isn't just going to go up to Zillow and be like, give me all your deals and I'll pay you a 30% referral fee or whatever. So that's my long tirade about Zillow. I'm not an anti-Zillow person, but I just think you have to be very conscious of the money part of it.
Yeah, Stephen, I agree with that. Also, the flex part I think you're referring to in the last half of the referral fee, I believe it's like 30 or 35%. I'm sure they do different deals for like the major players, which is cool. But again, going back to like that lady who did 6 deals, she didn't understand her spending $1 and what it was returning ratio, which is super important, that data part of it, where she would have been like, oh, for every $1 I spend, I'm getting back 35 cents. Maybe it's not going to be worthwhile. But the other thing that you have to keep in mind around that referral fee is you probably, in some cases, I should say, because some people are their own brokerages, but there's a profit margin there, right? So 35 to Zillow, 50 to your brokerage, or 25 or whatever. And then you have overhead that you are spending every month. So you want to understand that profit margin on the per source, in this case, Zillow lead to closing, to really understand what your return on investment is there. And it can quickly look like you made a ton of money, and then you actually do the math and you lost money or didn't make, you made $700. Mm-hmm. So $4,200 from 6 deals. And if you break that out in a what did I make per hour, I would argue that's a very small amount.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I feel like Zillow is one of those topics. We could probably talk about this all day, where it's just such a big topic. But you're right, the splits on this are so huge. Like you said, the referrals fees are like 35%, which is such a big percentage of somebody's commission rate, which is like, anyway. So yeah, that Zillow, it sounds like we have a consensus on this. It does give you leads. That is the truth. It does. We just need to make sure that in the end, the math works out on how much we're spending versus what we're going to be able to pull back from that. Okay. So now let's actually,
Tom, one final thought on that though. Even if you get to that point, you have to be in a position to take advantage of the opportunity that you're given. So how can you get a Zillow lead and turn it into 4 other leads or 10 other leads or 5 other transactions? That's where you make the money. The lead comes in and it's expensive, but you have to have the wherewithal and the kind of the foresight to plan ahead, to have the system in place to follow up with that person, to ask for referrals. When you get the 2, 3, 4 referrals from that Zillow lead is where you kind of see your profits really shine light on those profits there.
Yeah, I mean, you're literally tapping into a new sphere of influence. I mean, every time you get a lead, you're meeting new people. I've had agents that have gotten internet leads, and they'll close their mother and their brother and their sister before they close the lead that actually came in, because maybe that lead couldn't actually do anything, but the agent did such a good job that they referred their family. Another quick general point about lead gen is, we talked about, $4,200 over 6 transactions divided by the number of hours. That's already a low number, but then take all the time you spent on leads that went nowhere. That's still time. That's on a transaction basis, you can figure it out. But like, what is your time worth? So you may say, well, I closed these 6 Zillow deals and I made $4,200. I netted $4,200. Cool. But how many hours did you waste on ones that went nowhere? So if you wasted 50, 60 hours of your time pumping leads that were dead, you still got to factor that all into your costs. It's still all a cost of doing business.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay. That is a very broad topic, and I like it. So if it works for your business, great. I do think that, this is something that you'd have to talk about with, business partners and all of that, or just make sure that you work the math out before we start throwing money at that particular avenue. Now, there is another one that did come up, and I know we talked about this a little bit last week when it came to the personalization, writing out letters. But direct mail farming, so if you live in a particular area, or if you want to be the expert in a particular area, how are we able to get on the map with those people? And one way is the direct mail farming, or the every door direct mail is what they said, or said about that. So, Andrew, take us a little bit through what this is, and also how can we lean into this, and how big a dent is that really going to put into your marketing budget?
Yeah, so the thing with direct mail, I'll just start to say at a very high level, it's consistency. Do not go in with the mentality of, I'm going to do, for this purpose, every door direct mail, which is a USPS, United States Postal Service product that they sell by zip code or neighborhood, that you go to all the doors inside of a radius or circumference, whatever. But do not go into direct mail and say, I'm going to do direct mail for a month and get all this money. It is a long-term play. We have been doing direct mail since 2013. So we've been doing it consistently. Sometimes we don't do it every single month, but for the most part, it's month after month after month after month. Here's the thing again, you guys know I'm like a super systems guy, processes guy. Have a plan in place to track what is returning and take advantage of the opportunities that come your way. Do not squander it. But every door direct mail, Tom, is you go into a neighborhood. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area, for example. Let's say I want to do an every door direct mail. It's called EDDM for Georgetown in Washington, D.C. You go to the post office website, you set up a campaign, you send in your mailers, and it goes regardless of if it's an apartment that are rentals or a single family home or townhome, it gets sent to who it gets sent to. So I'll say that first. So you have to be aware of that, and you want to know the ratio of rentals versus actual homeowners. And then it just mails them. And you want to do this consistently. So that's just the mechanics of the every door direct mail. You set it up. It's very easy to set it up and do. But you also need to have good messaging. And what are you telling these people when they open it, if they even open it? So, Stephen, I think we've talked about this before, but there's statistics and data that says you have to mail someone either 6 or 7 times for them to even realize that you're mailing to them in the first place. So it is not a hard thing or an easy thing, I should say, to stomach that consistency. And I would hesitate to tell like a newbie with a very small budget to start with direct mail. I think listen to the first part of the podcast, part 1. There are easier, more economical ways to get your deals. But when you do have a massive operation and you can we're spending 5 to 15K every month on direct mail, just to give you an example. It works. You just have to have good articulate messaging going out with nice copy, a nice logo on it with pictures and a good message to get them. It's called direct response marketing. So you're sending all this stuff out, and the direct response is Tom getting my Sotheby's letter and saying, hey, I need to call Andrew, the agent. And, we have a unique phone number for that particular campaign. You call me, it says Every Door Direct Mail Georgetown, and I know where it's coming from and I know how to approach it. So that at a very high level is the approach for that kind of marketing program. But be very conscious of costs and be willing to go in it for the long run.
Absolutely.
And I would tag on to that. There's a difference between marketing and lead gen. Make sure that you're doing lead gen. Marketing, in very simple terms, in my opinion, lead gen requires a call to action or something that I have a reason to contact you. I'm giving you some reason, not just hey, I'm Andrew and I sell houses in Georgetown. No one cares, they don't.
No one cared actually. So.
They don't care about you at all.
No.
They want to know WIFM. What's in it for me? That's the only radio station they listen to. So, you have to go into it with that in mind and not as a vanity project. Because I see those billboards are that's a vanity thing for the most part. They work somewhere, some places, but for the most part, grocery carts, things like that, those are more vanity. That's more branding. There's no call to action. There's, and tracking. Like Andrew said, that unique phone number is such a cool idea. People are using QR codes and stuff like that now. But in our usage of QR codes, it's so one way. Like I can't tell who's scanning a QR code unless there's a lead capture on the other side. So I love the idea of a text code or a unique phone number that they have to contact, because then I can directly say this mailer, gave me this much business. Wash, rinse, repeat, or toss it. What do I need to change? You have to be able to track this stuff especially in a lead gen thing, because you're spending a lot of money. Lead gen is not cheap and is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, and at the very least, if you don't have a system that can auto track this for you, set up a spreadsheet, and as you have these calls come in, start tracking them, because you need to know if you're sending, and this kind of comes into play too if you're doing like split testing, like maybe one letter would have my picture. People don't like how I look and don't call me. Another one has somebody else's picture and they're better looking than I don't know, whatever reason. They decide to call one or the other. You want to know which one is actually producing, but not just producing deals. You want to know which ones are producing leads, the leads that turn into appointments, the appointments that turn into agreements, and then ultimately the agreement turning into a closed transaction, and then the revenue coming back to then again go back to the every dollar I spend is returning $5 rule. So you know exactly what is happening. So be prepared to be able to track that stuff, so you're just not burning your money and you're not wasting money, really having no plan in place before you start it.
First off, Andrew, you have the beard of Leonidas, so I wouldn't say that they're more handsome than you.
Thanks.
Second, Stephen, there's something you said in there that I do want to call out, which is you said that lead gen is not for the faint of heart. But look, lead gen and being able to convert and having that be a client, that's the business. That's what we're doing, right? And I know Andrew said that in a lot of words just now, but that's really how people make money in those transactions. And so I will say, with a few of those things, you said something like, what's in it for me? There is another side to that coin, which is the deeper relationships. Being able to make a relationship with somebody that they know you and trust you over the long term. I mean, what's in it for me is the house, right? But I want to go through that process with somebody that I trust. And so having that relationship with somebody means that lead that you get in, you're going to not, maybe you convert that into a transaction, but you start a relationship with that person. And that's where I see a lot of that value, because we're talking about an industry where the barrier to entry is so low, right? Anybody can really be a real estate industry, but it's sort of like anybody can pick up a basketball and shoot it, right? But only the people that are the most dedicated, that have the most skill at doing that relationship stuff, converting those leads, are the people that make it as the professionals that are particular in this league. I always like that comparison between professional athletes and real estate agents, because there is that skill level. Anybody can get into this industry, but if you're going to make a career out of it, there are certain ways that you have to do that, and that certain level where you have to understand the techniques and how we're able to make a career out of this. It's not one transaction. I'm looking to work with somebody again in 5 years, 5 years after that, for 10 transactions, right? I want to be their agent for their entire life. And I feel like with leads, you're taking the first step, right? There's that old saying, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. The lead is the first step. And the rest of somebody's real estate career, their journey, is going to be with you side by side. That's my little tirade there.
And when I say, what's in it for me, I preach value all the time. When I wrote my book on networking, it was all about providing value. I'm not just walking into a room and putting my hand out and asking for business. It's, what can I do for you? What can I do to help you? What can I do to make sure that you remember who I am? And, or want to introduce me to other people. And so it's those types of things, like even like after closing care is what I call it. I had agents when I worked the home warranty industry, they were petrified to call their client after closing. Well, what if I call them and there's a problem? Well, it's a good thing you called them. Now you can help solve the problem. And they're like, well, what if there's an issue with the water heater? Well, that's why you give them a home warranty, and then you talk, I give them the talk track or whatever. But, let's say it's 6 months, a year after the sale, you're calling that person, and, it's like, oh, yeah, I had a problem with a tree out back and blah, blah. Oh, you know what? I got a great tree person. Let me have him call you, yada, yada, yada. You've now provided additional value to them and given them a reason to say, man, Andrew is he's on top of it. He's my guy. If you need anything, and it's always, I shouldn't say always, but a lot of times it lines up with, because it's that reticular activation, it lines up with, oh, and my cousin just mentioned the other day that they were looking to sell a house or buy a house or whatever. People don't think about real estate until they think about real estate. It's, those of us in the industry live and breathe it. The general consumer, they don't think about it at all. Right. So don't assume. I know that's kind of off the lead gen track, but to your point, that it's that relationship building. And so if you're meeting a lead for the first time, try to figure out what it is that they need. Like, what can I do to help you? Not just how can I sell you a house today?
Yeah, I think it's important though, Tom. You make a really good point. Like, lead gen is kind of like that first step. But again, be in a position to get, Steven calls me off of a direct mail and I put him in my system. I get his name, his number, and his email. I put him on my newsletter. I might add him if I'm doing like farming or, just listed, just sold. He's now seeing me every week in my weekly email newsletter that I put out. Maybe I mail out a newsletter once a month. So that's the start of this top of mind mentality that, agents talk about all the time. Steven, I could have you call a letter, do a deal with you, and then never talk to you again. That's a transactional deal that if you're in the industry, you don't want to live transaction to transaction. You want to build that sphere. So although Steven and I may have been strangers before he decided to pick up the phone and call me, and then he knew me, he liked me, he trusted me, I sold his house. But now I have him. Steven mentioned it a little bit ago. Like, now that's my new person in my sphere. And you have an entire program. This is going into, like, again, the part one of what you do with your sphere. But that's another way to grow and snowball your sphere. So you are remaining top of mind. And then I'll mention one other thing. Ask Steven for referrals. A lot of people are afraid, I'm afraid to call someone because there's a problem. But what if you are calling to check in to see if there is a problem? You saw them and say, hey, Steven, you know what? Like, my business is referral based. You happen to know anyone? Just from that, took me 2 seconds to ask you that question. Oh yeah, my cousin is going to be doing this. And then you never know, your cousin might have someone, that person might have someone, but nothing's going to happen if I never talk to you again.
Right. And when we talk about lead gen, we often refer to the funnel. At least we do internally. It's the lead funnel. I think of it like a meat grinder. You got to dump all that stuff in the top, and whatever comes out's the sausage, but it all doesn't make it through. So there are different lead funnel kind of stages. So if I say top of the funnel, that's not a good thing. Top of the funnel is like the lowest quality. I got an email address because they clicked on something. That is a top of the funnel lead. Their intentions are very low right now. They're not maybe actively looking. I'm just clicking around on the internet, whatever. So the idea is to take those top of the funnel leads and move them down the funnel through your systems and your processes and your newsletters, and you're moving them toward their intentionality, because this statistic could be outdated by now, but a while ago, the amount of time from inception to actual transaction was about 17 months. From the moment someone first had the idea, I might want to buy or sell someday, what do? I'm going to go to realtor.com and click on stuff. Well, that's generating leads, and now they're getting calls. Why are you calling me? I'm not buying a house right now. But eventually they will. So agents get frustrated because they're like, well, these leads are all crap. They're all garbage. They might be garbage today, but in 12 months, they may be gold. So You've got to have those systems in place to take those top of the funnel leads and move them down and see what you can get to push out the bottom.
Steven, when we first started, I can't tell you how frustrating it was and how eye-opening it was to have that kind of a way of thinking, that these leads are garbage and they're not hot. They're not, they didn't want to sell today, so I'm never going to talk to them. We actually implemented a lost deal tracker in our platform, and we would have all these leads come in, and then they would be bad leads, right? But then we would have our lead manager monitor what came out on the MLS as off market, coming soon, or active, and cross-reference it. And the list of bad leads we had that wound up selling with other brokerages and then was astronomical and really scary, number one. But number two, we would go back and there would be no evidence that anyone on the team ever reached back out to that. The lead would come in January. It would come out with a different brokerage in June or July, sell for $2 million. And it was like, hey, I called them. They didn't answer. And then months went by. So don't sleep on these leads either. Take advantage of automations and follow up with them. They will come back, the 17-month rule, if that's still the case. Stay up on them. Stay up on them until they either buy with someone else or they tell you to stop staying up with them, right?
Well, they say it takes 5 no's to get to a yes, and most people stop after the first no.
Right.
Or the agents that don't stop asking are the ones that get the business.
Yeah. Or like, oh, I called Steven and I got his voicemail. Cool. So you're just done with that lead?
I guess that does bring up a good point of, yes, you have to be persistent, but Steven, talk a little bit about what is the shelf life of a lead? When somebody messages or they reach out to an agent, how long does an agent have to respond? I mean, it's quick, right?
Seconds, minutes. I mean, not more than a couple minutes. I mean, so think about, some of the lead gen programs out there are exclusive, but you pay for the exclusivity. But that doesn't mean that client or that potential client is sitting on the same platform waiting for you to call. Think about your buying behavior online. If I want information, I want it now. I don't want to wait till tomorrow to hear from somebody. I'm going to click here. Well, you didn't tell me what I want to know. Now I'm going over here. And again, the consumers don't understand the real estate industry, generally speaking. And so I've actually had people tell me that, well, I looked at different websites to see if I could get a better deal. Like they thought the price was going to be lower on another website. Like maybe there's a sale going on or something. It's all fed from the same place. But they'll go to Realtor, then they'll go to Zillow, then they'll go to Coldwell Banker, then they'll go, to Redfin or whatever, and they'll bounce, and they'll click on 5-6 different houses, generating leads everywhere they go. And we did a test. It was a realtor.com lead because we were just like, we're not having a lot of luck with these, I mean, we're contacting them within an hour. What's the problem? So we were sitting, it was our CEO, our leads manager, and myself, and she clicked on a lead. I think it was 17 seconds her phone was ringing from the real estate agent. 10 seconds later, a loan officer called her. 50 seconds later, a second loan officer called her. Within 1 minute, she had gotten called 3 times. And we're sitting around going, well, I mean, my boss and I knew, but like, it was like, oh, yeah, so an hour is probably not acceptable, an acceptable thing. And we've told that story multiple times to our agents. We're like, you have got to be on these. Like, you don't wait. Like, these have got to be top priority. A lead comes in, stop what you're doing if you can, and just reach out really fast. Even if it's hey, I'm walking into an appointment, but I saw that you had a question. I just wanted to reach out. I'll get back to you later or whatever. Or text me your information and I'll send you what you need. There has to be some kind of a touch. A lot of CRMs now have those automated welcome emails and things like that. That helps a little bit. It's that initial touch point, but it doesn't give me the information I want. Oh, thank you for your inquiry. We'll be back to you soon. Okay. Any day now. Like, I'd like an answer, please. That's why I think Google is so popular right now, because people are just like, I want to talk to somebody right now. Click, and they can just be connected through that agent's Google business page. Mm-hmm. And everybody wants that instant gratification. Of course, then you get into the millennial and Gen Zs that don't want to talk on the phone. So more like if you're more instant message and chat, if you can build that component in and be able to answer them quickly. So it's really, speed to lead is absolutely essential.
This real, there's actually, I think it's either a Harvard or a Yale study that's out there. Google it. And it was like, if you do not respond to this was an online lead, or maybe just leads in general, within like a minute or two, the chances of you converting go down by like 90% after that first minute. Because there are people that call in 17 seconds versus, hey, I got your lead or your message yesterday. They're like, dude, I've already talked to 20 people. Like, you're last in line. I'm not impressed. People are impressed by speed nowadays, and it is real. That's why automation helps, but also having the ability to take them live will win over automation all the time.
Okay. Wow, that was great. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about converting the leads and how quickly those are. Let's sort of redirect back to a specific type of lead, which I want to talk about automated follow-up. That's sort of a dovetail with what the topic we were just talking about. So, Client Giant or similar or something like that. Andrew, can you talk to us a little bit about the automated client follow-up leads and how that helps in getting back to somebody quickly versus being, maybe having to get on the phone and actually talk to them in 17 seconds?
Right. So I'll say this, it depends. If it's an inbound call, obviously it feeds to our salespeople. What we do in general before, again, when we set up any marketing campaign, we're very down to the lowest common denominator. So we'll do like Google PPC, postcard A, postcard B, postcard C. So we will know through that unique phone number what lead source is getting called. So that's first and foremost. We set it up that way. Everything gets recorded and automatically comes into our platform as postcard A, postcard B, postcard C, direct mail, for example. If our people do not answer it, we can auto trigger down to the source a different unique action plan to follow up with these prospects, right? So a Google PPC lead, source equals Google PPC. If we do not answer it, we'll automatically trigger a Google PPC touch plan that sends them a text saying, hey, we just tried to contact you. What's the best number? Is this the best number? We can, if we get their email, if it's not Google PPC, but if we get their email, it can auto email. So down by the source, and we know which sources work and need very fast attention and which ones don't. There's a priority pecking order of like, this is a super hot lead versus maybe a yard sign post can wait above a Google PPC lead, for example. But we also can, we tell our system like, hey, if it's a Google PPC, I want to text them the second it comes in if it's unanswered. and then an hour later or 30 minutes later, text them again, and then task someone on the team to also follow up. So varying degrees of aggressiveness in our cadences of follow up. And we have the ability to, depending again, what information we receive inbound from them, to call them, to text them, to direct mail them. Obviously, that one takes a little bit longer, or email them directly out of our system, either with automation or from someone on our team manually putting them on one of those touch plans. And then when they respond, it automatically notifies us of the response, goes to our phones, and then we're back in that live conversation.
Wow. How do you, Stephen, I mean, you've worked with people that have used these systems. How like, what sort of reaction have you seen using those systems?
You know, most of the consumers some don't realize it's automated. Some do think that they're getting actual emails from people, and if they're worded well and things like, they don't sound too generic. I find that agents, most agents do not take the time to set anything up. They just don't bother. They'll do they'll do a trigger email, a welcome email, and then they'll never build anything else in their campaign. And I think that's a mistake, because if your CRM, especially if it's tied into your website, everything should be driving them back to your website. Every action you ask them to take, go to my website and click here to look at this. Oh, you want to look at other properties? I can sell anything. Click here to set up a search or whatever. Click here to find out what your house is worth. Click here to find out how much you can afford. And it's driving them back to your website constantly. And if your website is any good, you can track what they're doing, and you can see Sally's checked these 3 houses and she clicked on the mortgage calculator, and she's really it's that intentionality. Years ago, Coldwell or Realogy bought a company called Zip Realty for their platform, Zap. Paid $170 million for that, and then probably pumped another 80 or 90 million into development. So probably sunk about $250 million into Zap. The big thing with Zap was the score. It was their Zap score, and it was supposed to rate their activity level to kind of flag you to say who's hot, who's not. This person opened an email. And I would have agents, when I was training on it, and they would say, like, well, this person has a really, really high Zap score, but all they did was read an email I sent. I said, well, it's because it's scoring them based on the behavior of everybody else. You have 5 people in your database, and you sent an email, one person opened it. That person, according to the algorithm, has a high intention. But if you're sending hundreds or thousands of messages out, and someone all of a sudden jumps up to the top of the list, that means they're serious. Like they're doing those actions. These geniuses out there know the type of behaviors that a consumer will do as they move toward a transaction. And they build these algorithms around it. They can track it, and they can say, oh, they've done these 3 things. This means this. And so, I think people are blown away when they actually do the automation correctly. And they're like, I can't believe that worked. Yeah, it does work. We use a CRM obviously for our lead gen stuff, and there'll be times where our director, she'll accidentally hit a button and like blast an email out to everybody or whatever in some category. She's like, I didn't mean to do that. Almost every time she does it, we get a deal out of it. It's like, oh, I'm glad you emailed me today. Yeah, I am actually ready to buy a house now. It's like, cool. I guess we should accidentally email them more often. But it's just that top of mind. You have to be the one that's in front of them when the moment strikes. There's a lot of realtors out there. I think the average person knows 9 to 12 realtors. So you're the stranger that they found on the internet. If you're not attempting to stay in front of them, they'll find somebody else.
That brings up a really good point. Is you talked about agents don't have a lot of times. They don't have a lot of these things set up. They don't have those things, and I hope nobody takes offense to this, but a lot of agents are not terribly tech savvy. I mean, it's sort of like trying to build a Lego Death Star with directions that are in another language. So how does somebody get these things set up? Where do we go for help? Are you able to set up these systems if I don't speak that language? Tech is not something that I've spent a lot of, I mean, not me, but I'm speaking metaphorically, but if I haven't spent a lot of time around technology, I don't know how these things work. I don't even realize, like, getting leads that are routed directly to me from different sources. How do I set those things up if I don't quite understand how it works?
So I'm going to put on my brokerage hat. So this is where the brokerage you work for comes in handy. And there's a cost of doing business across the board. Either you're at a transaction style company and you're keeping the lion's share of the commission, but you're on your own. There's rarely any significant support other than maybe some compliance and things like that. So you may say, oh, I'm getting 100% of my commission. Yeah, but like if you're paying other people to do everything else for you, are you really, getting it? Like I think years ago at a conference, the CFO of Remax gave a talk and said, yeah, the average take home is 70-30 for a Remax agent after they pay their bills. There's no such thing as 100% in real estate. But if you're at a full service brokerage, a lot of times they either have a tech stack that will accommodate you, or they have people that can help you build that. If you're working for a full service brokerage and you're having to go out and piecemeal everything together, it's probably not as full service as you would imagine. And so that's where a company like mine, we have the technology already built. There's templates. It's as easy as sitting down with somebody on my team and going, apply this template to this and put these people, we can sit with the agent and help build out their CRM campaigns in a matter of, an hour or less. But if you're on your own at a transaction model, you're probably going to have to go find someone to help you with that, or go out and buy a product that's off the shelf, and that's going to cost you. So you're paying for it no matter what. You're either paying for the service embedded in your fees to the brokerage, or you're out there writing individual checks or swiping your credit card at individual vendors, or paying a college student to set something up for you. So, it really depends on the service model that you're looking for.
And
so
the features
to summarize, sorry, really quick, just to summarize that, it sounds like don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're working at a brokerage where this is part of the deal, this is, the tech stack is something you're working with, don't be afraid to ask somebody for help. I mean, this isn't one of those situations where it's like, I need to be embarrassed because I don't know how that works. Ask for help. There are entire systems and teams of people that are available to you to help with just this specific purpose.
We love our agents asking us for help. Like, we get excited when an agent says, can you help me put my contacts in my CRM? Of course we can. Yes, we absolutely can, because we see the value of them using the tools. If they use the tools, they are much more loyal to the brand. They're much more likely to have longevity with the company because they see the value in what they're paying, and they're seeing this system works. I'm not saying we have our system's the only system that works. That's obviously not true, but that is a huge part of the value proposition of any brand, really, is our tech stack, our tools, our training. This is what you pay for. This is a part of the value proposition.
Sorry, Andrew, I cut you off. What were you saying?
I was saying to Steven's comment about the tech stack, it also depends on what features you're looking for. And there's so many variations of what a tech stack could look like pre-built, going out and finding it on your own, figuring out how to connect point solutions. So like different parts of software, like a CRM with the dialer, for example. There are out-of-the-box ones that already come ready to go. It's just what you're comfortable with from a functionality system point of view, and then obviously your budget for that kind of stuff too. But do your research, talk to people. If there's a team or an agent doing a lot of business and you've seen them in theirs, ask them. You got to figure out what works best for you. There's so many out there, but you got to do some research, because the worst thing you can do is use the wrong one that doesn't give you what you need based on your personal goals or functionalities that you want. And then you're starting with one hand tied behind your back. So while it's important from the long-term vision of what you want your tech stack to look like, the very start of it not going down, like I've been on so many different platforms, for 2-3 years, and then the third year I'm like, I want it to do this and it can't happen. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go figure it out and start over again. So it can happen, and it's expensive and frustrating, but it's how it is. You just have to figure out what you need and what you want your system to be able to do for you. Ours was, we wanted our system to buy back our time, so we weren't in our system all the time. We wanted our system to proactively tell us stuff. So that's kind of where our vision came from for ours. But it's to each his own, right? What are you comfortable with spending, and what are you comfortable with from knowing how to even use it?
Right. And I would say, I echo that. Ask. There's a lot of networking groups out there. There's real estate mastermind groups and all that stuff. Ask, what are you using? Why is it effective? But I would ask why they like it. Oh, I love Follow Up Boss. Tell me why. Just, what about Follow Up Boss just that you hands down you love? Is it because it's easy? Does it actually generate business? A lot of agents will say, well, I've got a website. Okay. And that's for lead gen. Okay. Good luck with that. Like, I had one of our agents sign up for a website, and I went and looked at the package that they had purchased, and it was like, 20 to 30 visitors a month. And I'm like, okay, you realize that's not leads, right? That's just literally people going to your website.
Right.
The percentage of people that go to your website that actually click on something is really, really tiny. So I don't think you're going to be getting a lot of leads from this website. But even if you do, what are you doing with them? Does your website hook into anything else? If it's generating a lead that doesn't go anywhere, it's useless. I had agents that didn't want to use the brand's provided website, which was free or included in the value proposition. Well, I have my own website. Hey, I respect that. How much money did you make off the website last year? What? How much money did you make? I don't know. Oh, so you can't track your website's effectiveness? It doesn't generate leads? It's a worthless website. You've just spent thousands of dollars or whatever building a vanity project. It looks pretty, your face is on it, but it does not serve a purpose. So yeah, you have to find out from people, like, did you actually generate leads from this source? Or how did this CRM help you, get the leads down the funnel? You dig a little bit deeper when you're asking, not just, this one's, the cheapest. Cheap, you get what you pay for in this world. So yeah. Cheap doesn't really mean anything.
We were using our CRM, we started with the end in mind, right? Like, what did we want our platform to tell us? And it wasn't, we want it for lead gen. We have to get leads and whatever. We knew how to lead gen and market and do our direct mail and PPC and referrals, right? We wanted it for what is working and what isn't, from both a marketing perspective, but a personnel perspective as well. So we used it as a vehicle to track relentlessly all the metrics of marketing, how many leads through how much revenue, but also for our team members too, how much revenue or deals our agents were bringing in, our appointment setters, our agents in the field, that kind of thing. So it would tell us, out of our 10 agents, one agent was literally returning $0. So we addressed that sooner rather than later. So that was, and this is what I meant, like, to each his own. What are you trying to get out of a system? We wanted to run our business like a business, and we needed it to tell us business ops data. And it tells us that in real time. So we're seeing the problem 2, 3, 4 months sooner than most other systems out there, just because of the way we have ours set up.
Remember when we said we were going to make these shorter?
Well, man, we need to pick boring topics then.
This is just such a rich topic. We have like 10 more of these bullet points. All right, let's do one more. Let's do one more. And this one is a fun one. And I want to talk about the efficacy of certain lead channels, because there are certain things that, it is going to get your name out there. It's going to work with brand awareness, but is it a good channel to get leads? One of those is radio, TV, and streaming. So using that, or billboards, or ways of getting your name out there. So that can be good for brand awareness, but is that going to bring in leads? So, Steven, what do you think about putting on a TV ad or putting on a billboard so that people can see who you are, and are they going to respond to those?
So, generally speaking, billboards work better in resort markets. So vacation markets, I'm driving down the road. I see, I'd love to buy a beach house here. That's about and really, really rural markets. Like some of our areas, like up in Pennsylvania, billboards everywhere. Everyone has a billboard. People have 10 billboards around town. It's ridiculous. If you don't have a billboard, you're nobody. I don't understand the mentality, but whatever. But again, it's that what's in it for me? It's the call to action. Like, what about this billboard makes me want to call you? What about that TV ad or that streaming ad is going to make me go, let me whip out my phone and grab the QR code or write down this number or whatever, or click on it. A lot of that stuff is for branding. I don't feel like those are good lead gen channels. It's more information and branding and things like that. Like radio, maybe it's it's awareness. It's, hey, come on down to Coldwell Banker on Saturday and we're having a hog roast or whatever. I don't know. It's not really like a call us today to sell your house anymore. I think back in the day, it certainly by print advertising. Don't get me started. If I was going to go video, I would look at YouTube and I would look at streaming like Hulu or something like that. But I mean, I'm one of those people, I pay to not have commercials. So your money is wasted on me. I pay extra for Hulu. I pay extra for YouTube. So I don't have to watch the ads. But they have I think it's called TrueView on YouTube, where you only pay if they don't press skip. So you're only paying for people that are actually sitting through your ad. Arguably YouTube ads can be, pretty effective, but it's, what good does it do you if the person's in Montana and you sell in Virginia, but they're on YouTube and they're watching video, or buy a house from me in Northern Virginia. It doesn't mean anything to me. So it's harder to target some of that stuff. But they have targeting mechanisms. Obviously Google has all that built in. So that's my 2 cents.
What do you think, Andrew? Do you think any of that, the ways of doing advertising on some of those antiquated platforms?
Yeah, so I'll be the first to admit I don't have firsthand knowledge of these. I've looked into commercials, and I got like a multiple 5-figure price point and ran the other way, because I guess I'll say this, like, if you're doing it like billboards, I know people that do billboards, and they are in resort areas like Tennessee, Stephen, and they swear by like high volume, but a lot of like, oh, I just saw your billboard, decided to call. So the quantity was there. I don't know, but I honestly can't speak to the quality. What I can speak to is the lead sources that we just spent the last hour that I do. That is a super high quality lead source, so we focus on that. The other thing I'll say just about lead gen in general terms is don't do 50 different lead sources. Start small, listen to do open houses, grow, have the capital, and then start with a direct mail campaign, but do it very small until let revenue lead that program, right? Get revenue to pay for it. Get revenue to build and grow your farming area, your every door direct mail, etc. Don't do too many things at once because you won't be able to focus on it. But figure out what your top 1 to 2 to 3 are, put a fence around it, rinse and repeat until you are ready to do the 4th one, and then ready to do the 5th one. So do billboards work? Stephen, I think you would know better than I would. Commercials were just too expensive. And commercials, in my opinion, do target a different type of lead that we could, that's a whole nother conversation. But we kind of just stayed out of it because we had things that were working and we just stuck by that. What you don't want to do, guys, is have a Google PPC campaign working for a year, then go do commercials, but allocate money from your Google PPC and then not know how to track properly or convert the commercial. And then your PPC is suffering and you don't know what the heck happened because your revenue went down 25%. That's what you want to avoid when you're planning and strategically thinking about your lead gen.
And I would just like to give a little bit of parting advice. For those of you who are excited about lead gen and you're going to call all the lead gen companies out there and see what they have to offer you, learn how to calculate your conversion rate first. Know what your numbers are. Be very conservative. I have vetted probably 60 plus lead gen companies out there. They also have my cell phone number. I'm using a burner phone next time. I still get texts from like Ylopo or Real Geeks, and it's been 3 years, which is good marketing. But ask a lot of questions, challenge their assumptions. I had a guy from Zillow tell me 10% conversion, and I'm like, yeah, right. I do not believe you. Any number they tell me, I cut it in half immediately. So if they say a 5% conversion, I'm looking at 2.5, and then I usually shave it down to the round. I'll round it down to 2, and even 2, I'm like, no. If you don't kid yourself, like, oh, I'll convert much better than that. The average is 1%. So the best in the business is probably not even 10%. I don't know, Andrew, you could probably speak to what your team's conversion rate is, but you guys have been doing it a lot longer. Our team, on average, across the board, it hovers right around maybe below 8%, just below 8%. And those are scrubbed. Like, we're doing a lot of back end work before we hand it off to an agent. So these are not just internet lead, call this person. We're incubating them for a year or more in some cases. So don't kid yourself. If you can't make the numbers work on like a 1% or maybe a 2% conversion, it's not going to work. So don't joke. I could get a 10% conversion out of these. No, you can't. It's really, really unlikely. And it's not that you're a bad agent. It's just the nature of lead gen conversion.
Yeah. Stephen, I agree with everything you just said. My parting comment would be to echo and kind of expand on a little bit. Be in a position to track relentlessly. That's how real businesses run. Real estate shouldn't be treated any differently. Real estate agents sometimes don't maybe think it's a real business. I don't know. Some are hobbyists, some, 1 or 2 a year. But if you really want to be an agent and that is your career, you need to track and know what is going on from your lead gen sources and what is converting and what is not. So if anyone catches anything from this episode, regardless of what kind of lead source you're doing, whether it's free or paid, track your numbers, because your numbers do not lie. That is how you predict and plan your next month or quarter or year, with real data, not just, I think Zillow worked, but then you look at real data and it actually didn't work. It actually cost her way more. She could have held 20 open houses and probably had a better profit margin, Stephen. She just didn't know. But she didn't know because, you weren't tracking it. You weren't actually looking at real data. But what do all these huge companies do? They're all about data. They spend billions of dollars on data. Do you think that's on accident? So know your data. Set up, like I said before, if anything, set up a whiteboard. It doesn't matter. Or set up a CRM that can track it for you. Just start tracking.
I love that. All right. That's it for the Renegade Consortium podcast this time. If you weren't able to catch the first podcast talking about leads, it is the one above this one, wherever you're seeing it, either on Facebook or podcasts. But it talked a lot about the other kinds of leads that you can manage. If you have your database, how are you able to manage that without putting a dent in your marketing budget? Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next month.